Ani, this is Jadyn Toulouse for Spartan Youth Radio. With me today is Shawn Atleo, the National Chief for the Assembly of First Nations. Welcome to Spartan Youth Radio, Chief Atleo.
Thank you.
For those who don't know you, who is Shawn Atleo and what is the Assembly of First Nations?
Well, Sityaks Inchet. Shawn Atleo is also Inchet. Histakshit Ahosit from the village of Ahousit. It's a little fishing village, part of the Nuu-chah-nulth nation, Tsiik-tsiik Kokowitsa, the Nuu-chah-nulth language spoken amongst our people. I come from a long line of whalers, was what our people did throughout history, right on the edge of the continent on the Pacific Ocean. And I come from a territory that is, they call us the saltwater people because we rely so heavily on the seafoods. And we spend more time on the ocean than we do on the land. In the Assembly of First Nations, I have the great honor now to be serving my second 3-year term and serving the 633 First Nations communities across the country and over 52 languages. And the responsibility that I have is to support First Nations leaders, First Nations governments as they look to ensure that our rights and title are protected, the treaties are implemented. And in particular, one of the main areas is to support the potential of the young people from our nations to achieve their full potential.
So why are you here at Espanola High School today?
As part of supporting communities, First Nations chiefs have made education one of the top priorities. I mean, everything is important, right? Everything from supporting child welfare to building our economies to caring for the environment. These are all things that we've inherited as First Nations from our ancestors that are important. Education is something that we continue to struggle to make sure that First Nations learners are treated fairly and equally. It still is not the case, by the way. First Nations students, for example, receive less funding than the average student in Canada. And at a time when our languages are threatened, First Nations languages are really threatened, we always have to remember that many of our parents and grandparents were sent to residential school, and that happened for 7 generations where they attempted to forcibly take away our language. So the idea of supporting learners to not only succeed in school, to do well in school, to be able to go on a post-secondary or to a trade, but also to achieve an education while remembering what your roots are, from the territory you come from and the language that your ancestors spoke, that we keep all of that strong. So that's part of the reason for being very, very thankful for being invited to your school here today.
So why is it important for First Nations youth to be interested in promoting and preserving our culture?
Oh, I think first of all to honor our ancestry, and you come from yours, and I met students here today from Sagamok and from Whitefish, and so you've got students from 2 communities, and both of those communities, just like mine of Ahousit, had people who went to residential schools where we were taught our culture was bad, it was backwards, and that we were essentially savages without governments or laws or morals, and so there's been an effort to take all of that away. They used to say that residential schools were an effort to take the Indian out of the child. And so what the elders have for years now, especially for the last 30 years, it was called Indian control of Indian education was the goal back in the 70s. And today that goal is still valid. It's First Nations control of First Nations education. And so while the leaders are out there making education a priority, seeking the funds and resources to support things like language training, and supporting First Nations chiefs and councils and education leaders to make sure that our culture, our heritage, and our language remain strong, we are also reaching out to Canadian society because they haven't learned the truth about our people or the truth about our history. So it's important for students to, I think, feel proud about their identity and feel proud of the genius and the brilliance of all of our people, and especially of what the ancestors left for us. And to accept the responsibility as young people today, show leadership by grabbing that identity so that the young people coming behind you are going to also feel strong and proud with their identity.
So why is education so important to First Nations communities?
First Nations have always had education as an important priority. Within our teachings in my village, even before a child was born, he or she would have songs sung to them when they were in the womb to help them understand that they're going to be born into a great nation and a great peoples with strong languages. Then when that child is born in my village, they receive their first name so that they understand that they belong and that they're loved by a family and by a nation. And as they grow and they develop, they're supported in their learning every single step of the way. And I see that amongst all of our First Nations, that learning and education has always been important. The stories that are told are important to remember. Stories, old stories that teach you about life. It could be about the hemlock tree who has the smallest pine cone because the hemlock tried to budge in the front of the line with all the other big trees when it was time for the pine cones to be handed out. But hemlock tried to budge and got sent to the back and ended up with the tiniest pine cone. And to this day, you know it's a hemlock because at the very top it's drooping because the head is hanging low because hemlock got a little bit ashamed at trying to budge in front of everyone else. And all of our nations have these stories. And so I believe it's important not only for us as First Nations and for First Nations learners and young people, I think it's important for Canada and the world. Help us bring us back to a place of harmony and respect with the living environment around us as well as with other people.
Before I let you go, what advice can you give to First Nations teenagers that want to be proud of their communities and culture but don't know where to start?
That's a great question. I know even for myself, I think it begins with recognizing that when I was in school, there were so many messages out there that was telling me from the mainstream not to be proud. Even the history books didn't even tell the truth about my own people. And I think we begin with looking to our own families and our own teachings and our own cultures, and like I was saying earlier, our own stories, because there is tremendous power there. I feel like it's our time as First Nations, and not just as First Nations in Canada, but as Indigenous peoples. We're connected with millions of Indigenous peoples around the world who are going through a similar experience as we are, where our lands were taken, but now we're on a path to achieving justice on lands and continue to strive for that. We've had residential schools for generations where they attempted to take our language away. Now, schools like yours and communities like Whitefish and Sagamok are fighting to support the young people to be reconnected with their language, their lands, their territories, stories of their ancestors, understand their treaties. But we're also reaching out to Canadians as well. Because if Canadians understand the truth and recognize that we are all treaty people, then if they share a sense of pride that they are treaty people with Anishinaabe people who are brilliant people with genius, who've always had laws and morals and order and governance and great stories and a way of living with the environment around us that was full of a sense of harmony and a recognition that all things are living and all things must be respected. That's the greatness of our heritage that we have. And for us to begin to recognize that. Yes, we do have scars. We do have deep pain that still occurs in our families. And those can be turned into scars of resilience and strength. They don't need to be just scars of pain that has us remain in that place. There's much healing that we can do by rediscovering our identity and our heritage. That's why I say today, First Nations young people are told, you're the leaders of tomorrow. Well, I'm saying to you right now, as an interviewer on your radio with fellow students here in school, you're the leaders of right now. You're helping to lift our nations up and inspire us older guys to remember to continue to fight hard to support you for your education success.
Well, thank you for your time today, Chief Atleo. And I have a little gift for you as a token of our appreciation for coming to our school.
Miigwech, in my language, tleko, tleko. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Jadyn Toulouse with Assembly of First Nations National Chief Shawn Atleo. For more great cultural content, visit SpartanYouthRadio.com.